There we go. Get my mic closer. What's up, fam? Fam-a-lam. Make that quiet. There we go. That's a bit better. Alright, let's start up the game. So, I decided that I wanted to stream today, and I figured that I'd talk about some of the projects that I have going on, because that seems like something people might be interested in. I guess. But I guess we can start with some of the smaller ones. Once the game loads. Here we go. Alright. So, one of the projects that I have been consistently working on is my server. Not this server that I'm on right now, but Discord server. And I would say it's going pretty well, but it's been rough. Not gonna lie. Being a small server in millions of servers is not easy. And yeah, we've been having a lot of trouble getting members and stuff. Just the usual sort of server problems. I mean, I'd like to think that we have a very close community, but like, I think the reason I think that is like my staff are like always on. Well, some of my staff are always on. And it makes it seem more alive than it actually is. You know, I should probably just go sleep. I mean, it's a fun project, but it's going a lot slower than I thought it would. And because of that, we've had to downsize quite a bit from what we were like starting as. Because when we started, we had like a bunch of clans and like guilds on different games, and we had servers, like a network of servers on Minecraft and Gmod and CSGO, but nobody ever joined, which I'm sure that's partially my fault, like just not knowing what I'm doing, but is definitely very frustrating. Trying to like grasp for success when, you know, when you're essentially invisible to most of the world. And we've had to stop accepting new members because of stuff going on with Discord itself. But I'm still dedicated to, like making it a success, but it's kind of had to take the back burner for a while just because of, how everything's been going. And I thought, like, people being in quarantine would, like, make it easier to get new members, but it seems to have made it harder somehow. I don't know. Yeah, it's just a lot of unfortunate circumstances all stacked against me. And I've had to start running the server itself in a way that I don't actually like, just because um, just because my staff aren't doing what I'd like them to be doing for various reasons, not all on them, but they just don't work in the way that I was hoping they would. And it's put a lot more work on me to keep the server up and running, which I'm partially okay with, but at the same time it's like I have other projects that I want to be working on, and I hired staff so that I wouldn't have to be doing all the work. And yeah, I don't know. Is my there we go. Okay. Let's turn this off. That helps with background noise a lot. I guess I'm just gonna have to be sweating during this stream. That's not something I'm looking forward to. Yeah, well, another reason that we've had to begin downsizing a lot of this stuff is just because I can't afford to pay for everything that I was paying for. Because when I started it, I didn't have a job. And now I can't go into my job because I got sick and they don't want me coming in because they're afraid that they will also get sick. So until I get tested, I'm not allowed to go in, and I can't get tested because I haven't been in, like, I can't prove that I've been in direct contact with anybody who got sick with it. So I'm kind of just stuck for the moment. So I can't go into work, so I'm kind of just stuck doing all of these little projects, hoping that some of them will start paying, but I guess that's most of the Discord stuff and, like, my job. Let's see, what's something else that I've been working on? I'm trying to think of, like, the different stuff that we're doing. just because like we've had so many ideas, but not all of them are being put into action right now. So, let's see. My friend and I, are starting a new YouTube channel, which means that this one will probably die off. Not that it's not already dead, but I think having both of us involved it'll keep us motivated, as opposed to, you know, because we were both going to start channels. I did start a channel, and obviously that has gone splendidly. But, yeah, I think because we would both just like stop uploading and editing stuff for a long time. Just because, like, it's hard staying motivated when nobody sees your stuff. But I think having both of us working on the project will keep us motivated enough to like keep working on it and uploading, because it'll be more fun with both of us. Because sometimes it's hard to have fun when you're streaming or like recording by yourself, because especially if nobody's even watching, like I'm literally just talking to myself right now, which is kind of nice. It's kind of like a diary thing, but like, yeah, it's hard to get excited when nobody else is there to get excited with. Yeah, so we're gonna start stuff. I'm gonna start using a less fake online persona, because like when I started the channel I was like super self-conscious and I didn't want to be me. I wanted to be somebody else, so I made a persona where I was someone else, and I don't need that anymore. I'm more confident in like who I am. So, well, it's not that I'm more confident in who I am, it's I want to be more confident in who I am. And I feel like one of the first steps is like embracing the fact that I'm not this fake person that I sometimes pretend to be. So that's one of the biggest changes to the channel. So we're kind of gonna be, we're not derivative, we keep telling ourselves that, but we totally are. We're doing like a Game Grumps sort of style, where one of us would be playing while the other would be... So we play like opposite types of games. So he'll be playing the games that I usually play, and I'll be playing the games he usually plays. And because, you know, the one that experiencing it for the first time is the one playing, they'll give better reactions if they're playing. And the one who has already played gives better commentary, because like they know a lot of stuff and like lore and backstory to like the games and stuff. So yeah, I'm excited about that. It's fun so far. So far, it has been fun, and I expect it to continue being fun. So that's the YouTube stuff. I think that's most. I think that's covered most of it. And I guess now we go on to the title of the stream. Game development. Yay. I would sound more excited if it wasn't so exhausting. And like, I'll be honest, I think the most exhausting part is, it's not even making it, it's like trying to decide what ideas you're going to use. Because we come up with hundreds of ideas every time we meet up. Like, we already have like 4 or 5 game concepts like lined up to be made. But just between the two of us, we don't have enough skill level to to actually make some of those mechanics happen. So we've had to cut down, and we just came up with a concept that we're ready to work on. It's like the simplest out of all of them, but it's also something that we're like really excited about. I don't want to reveal too much because we haven't actually started like developing everything yet, but it's a turn-based game where you're like in a war, so you have to like command your troops to go and do stuff. It's very simple stuff, but we're hoping to make it interesting in new and innovative ways. People said it wasn't possible, but we did it. Sorry, I'm making fun of E3 presentations. They all say the exact same thing. Do cows not grow up anymore? Do they not grow up unless you feed them grass? Oh, that completely destroys this system. Great. I'm not making a stupid sheep farm style piece of crap with the things. Okay. That's very frustrating. It's fine though. I can deal with it. I'll go, I'm gonna clear this crap out first. Just everything, just get out. I don't even care about organizing right now. Just, except for that. I need that and that. And that. Do I need anything else? Yeah, I'll leave it alone. Oh, and I have my boat. Good. Oh, I don't have any arrows. I'm like super scatterbrained at the moment. Yeah, so the one that we're going to be working on the soonest, like in the most nearby project is that turn-based sort of combat one. It's I think the gameplay is mostly going to be focused on tactics. Most of it is trying to decide like what the best way to like command your troops is, and there are going to be like different things that make it more difficult, but that's the biggest thing, like trying to decide if if like sending your troops to a certain part of the map is going to benefit you or get them killed. So yeah, it's not a super um, complex thing, but we definitely think that it's going to be very fun to play and make. um, I think some of the hardest things that we've had to deal with, because we haven't gone into a lot of difficulty with this particular game, but some of the other games that we've already planned out, we've had a lot of problems figuring out how to do. Let's see. I'm trying to think of like what the biggest issue would be that we've had to overcome. Probably just figuring out the order of how to do things. Ooh, or no, the biggest thing is definitely the game engine. Because that's one of those things that's like the first big decision whenever you're creating a game is what game engine to use. So the original game that we were going to create is a 2D side scroller. I'm not going to say any more about it because if we do end up making it, which it's like our main goal, we're like creating all of these simpler projects first to like get experience. But like whenever it's done, it's gonna be several years down the line, so I'm just not gonna say anything about it. But it was. We actually started developing it when we found out that the game engine that we were going to be using wasn't actually going to function in the way that we wanted it to. So like most of the features of the game that we wanted to include weren't going to be possible, and it was like the main features of the game. So we had to scrap everything that we had been working on, which was super disheartening. We took a break for like several days just to gather our thoughts because it was incredibly frustrating to realize that the thing we had been working on for a little over a month was like just useless, and we had to start all over. Which I know, like a lot of game companies, like that same thing happens on a much larger scale, where it's like they've been working on mechanics for like a year, and they have to redo it. But for us two new game developers, it's like that was the first big disappointment. So it definitely was very frustrating. So we still don't know what game engine we're going to be using for it, but we have sad suspicions that we're going to have to make our own engine, which we're not ready for, which is the main reason that we've kind of held off on developing that game that we want to make. Just because we don't have the tools or the skills or anything. We don't even know the first thing about making the game engine. Using a game engine is like a different thing, but making one is an insanely big undertaking that we're just not prepared for, so as sad as it is, we have to stop development on that game for the foreseeable future. So then after we sort of, I guess not scrapped it, but like we stopped development on that first game, we were like, okay, we need something a lot more simple. There's no random, well, very little procedural generation. It would have to be, you know, a lot of it is story and art based. So just to give us the freedom to experiment with gameplay and mechanics without fear of, you know, ruining the game. Because if that was the main focus of the game, was the mechanics and gameplay, then we would have to focus just on that, like, for a very long time. Well, not just on that, but like that would be our main focus for a very long time. Like for the majority of the thing, for the development, and that's just something that that's just something that first of all, we don't really want to do. Like, we're still doing it for fun. We're not getting paid or anything. Well, yet. But it's definitely, that's one of the hardest parts, is like having to balance our paying jobs with these jobs. But anyways, if it was gameplay and mechanics based, then we wouldn't be able to experiment. We would have to, because then the player would be focusing on the gameplay and everything. So that would force us to like be very conservative about the mechanics that we used. It would be a lot of like things that were from other games that we knew worked, and it wouldn't give us the opportunity to experiment with the stuff that we want to do. So we decided that that game would focus on just like story and art, so that we would have the freedom to experiment with different systems and whatnot, which I think that it was a decision that needed to be made, but it was definitely not an easy decision, partially because of our own preferences of games and whatnot, but also I think mainly was realizing that we would have to make the game, we would have to get the writing and visuals and audio like spot on to distract from the fact that the mechanics are very sloppily put together, for lack of better phrasing. Yeah, so that's not. I didn't know you could do that. That's amazing. What's the one I'm looking for? That still didn't do it. Okay, great. Alright. Yeah, but that was something that we were kind of like worried about, because we're okay artists, but like we're not amazing. Like I'll be the first one to say it. Like we are still um, slightly above average in terms of experience with like making this type of thing. Because we've made some textures for other games, just for like mods and stuff, just for our own personal use and for our friends' use, but never creating an entire style and figuring out the models and stuff. Um, it was it's a big change. So, um, realizing that that's kind of still um, some of the systems and mechanics and stuff that we were going to be experimenting with was still excuse me. Ugh, I apologize. Some of the systems that we were going to be experimenting with and like working on are still slightly out of our reach. Not they were much more achievable than what we were doing before, but they're still very in depth. Maybe not complicated, but very specific and in depth things that have to fit together just right in order to be effective in terms of gameplay and uh, just making sure that it actually functions the way that we want it to. Alright. So we were like, alright, this is. We're moving on to our. Oh man. Our fifth idea? Fifth or sixth? Which is the one that I mentioned earlier, which focuses solely on, well, not solely, but like mostly on gameplay. Just because it gives us the opportunity to learn what the best way to introduce gameplay mechanics and like just the very base level stuff that most game developers are like. It just comes naturally because they've done it so often, but that we're still figuring out. So we're kind of moving in that general direction of figuring out different mechanics and how to introduce them, how to make sure that they work together without cheapening other mechanics, which is definitely, I think that's the thing that I'm gonna have the most trouble with is like, I don't know about the other developer, but definitely I'm having a lot of trouble making sure that mechanics fit the theme of the game, but also fit with other mechanics that we already have, like basically confirmed. Because sometimes you have to, you know, you have to let go of some of the mechanics that you want just because it doesn't work in that particular game, or it doesn't work with some of the other mechanics that you do, just because it would render them obsolete, or it might just make them less effective or less fun or something like that, where it would basically make them, you know, not what they were meant to be. So that's the thing that I've had trouble with most, in terms of concepts and that sort of thing. Is definitely having to like sacrifice some of the stuff that I'd like to have in a game, just because it doesn't fit. I remember the very first, or one of the very first concept sessions that we had for the first game. We got into this massive argument about, what even was it? It was about 2D versus 3D in the game. We were arguing whether we should have the game be 2D or 3D. And I admit that I think the 2D would work better. I think the 3D is something that we would have to change a lot of concepts to fit better. I still think it would look beautiful and it would work okay, but in terms of simplicity for development, the 2D is usually the way to go. So we went for the first concept being two-dimensional, then the story-based and graphics-based one being three-dimensional, and then this newest turn-based thing. It's kind of like an RPG, but it's not. I don't know. It's most likely going to be two-dimensional or like 2.5 dimensional. So we've kind of gone back and forth a lot about what the best course of action is in terms of, the dimensions of the game. And again, a lot of that is our personal bias coming into it, where I much prefer 3D games and he prefers, more retro games and board games, that kind of thing. So, our personal biases definitely come into effect, but I had to admit that my personal bias was causing a lot more problems in concepts and development. Had to give up on that. I'm smirking right now because I threw a giant hissy fit about it, like a child. Which was just totally stupid and uncalled for, and I find it really amusing. Yeah, I'm very childish sometimes. Wow. Anyways, moving on from being amused at past failures.
The 2D versus 3D argument lasted for several days through several sessions before I finally gave in. I was very upset about giving in. I was like, "You didn't win. You just irritated me so much that I just don't even want to talk to you anymore." It was, yeah. It's not even fun anymore. Very childish stuff. Uh, but, oh, hello, bud. How are you doing? Um, but once we figured out, once we decided that we would go in the 2D sort of direction, uh, things started going a lot faster, a lot smoother. Um, yeah, you stupid. What are you doing? Um, yeah, so we started development on that game, then we moved on, then we moved on, until we got to here. And we only just decided on the concept last night. We're going to start discussing various uh, basic parts of the game on Thursday. It is Tuesday, I think. Yeah, it's Tuesday. And I think it's Tuesday. Yeah, it's Tuesday. Um, and yeah, it's exciting, but also kind of terrifying. Like, game development is something we both wanted to do since middle school. Heck, we've known each other and been friends since middle school. Sort of reintroducing ourselves to each other because we fell out of contact for a few years, but it's a scary thing to finally be doing something that you've wanted to do your whole life, because you don't want to disappoint yourself, but also, even if you're proud of it, like, what's next? You know, like, you finally achieved the thing that you've wanted for so long. What comes next? Like, you don't necessarily have goals after, you know, doing it, and it's scary. It's adulthood, but it's scary. So, yeah. I mean, it's definitely worth the scariness. I mean, all of life is scary if you look at it in the right way. But, yeah, very excited to start doing stuff. I guess the difficulties that we're going to be having, the anticipated difficulties, like I said, we haven't actually started doing stuff yet, but I think the things that I'm expecting to have the most difficulty with is both. It's only the two of us developing these games, but also I think timing of like what pieces that we do, as well as gosh, it's my dad. I don't know what the heck he's doing. I think the timing of things, of what pieces that we develop when, I think that's going to be a big issue. Not issue, but like it's going to make things more difficult. If we had a team of like 5 or 6 people, it would be slightly less of a problem. I mean, it'd still be a problem, but like everything has to be developed in sync. Because if you develop the gameplay before the graphics, then the graphics might seem out of place, and vice versa, and so everything has to be developed at the same time. So that's something that we've had trouble with in the past. That's my biggest concern. Was something else. We still haven't decided on a game engine. We have a few ideas. I have a few ideas. We haven't discussed it yet, though. But that's the next big step, is finding the engine that works for us, that's gonna make sure that our game works the way that we want it to. And then learning that new system. So it's kind of unfair, the workload, but we're kind of dealing with it in different ways. But I cannot code for the life of me. I can configure files. I can, kind of jimmy rig together different tutorials, but I can't straight up just do the coding. So he's having to do most of, if not all of the coding. Whereas I am doing most of the artwork, which is funny because he's going to school for art, and I work in the IT department. But the artwork is kind of a joint thing, and I do a lot of the research for him. I need to craft. So like I find a lot of sources for him to follow and read up on. So I do a lot of the research for him just to sort of even out the workload a little bit better. But that's sort of the way that we've had to split things, just because of my inability to think in that way. Which he kind of thinks in coding language anyways, but yeah, that's another thing that we've had trouble with, being just 2 developers, as opposed to a team of like around 8 to 10, with very little experience as well. But it's been fun, like, arguing, I guess. Like, we don't really argue very often. That was the first argument that we've had in a long time, was the 2D versus 3D thing, and we haven't had an argument since. It's more like a debate, which is totally unfair. Like, let me rant about this for like a quick 5 seconds. Like, he was on the debate team for like 8 years, okay? He has an unfair advantage. I stutter all the time. Like, it's not fair. Okay, now that I've gotten that out of my system. Yeah, that's something that I laugh about a lot. But we shoot ideas back and forth, and we talk about the pros and cons of everything. And even when we don't see eye to eye, we usually agree about what would be the easiest or best way to change things in terms of development, which is something that we've had to do a lot, just sacrificing some things, just so that we can actually make this game happen. Because between the two of us, we probably have made upwards of 60 fully fleshed out games inside of our own heads, but we've never actually gone out and gone through with it and started development. So yeah, it's fun, I guess, trying to figure out what the best course of action is. I'm gonna put this up right now. Because I think that my program is not showing me what it needs to be showing me. Yeah. Oh yeah, it's not even titled correctly. How do I edit? Here we go. Alright. We can just leave that there. And make sure it's muted. Here we go. Okay. I had no idea that that was happening. Because usually my software takes care of all of it. But I realized that it was not taking care of all of it. So that's fun. I don't even remember what I was talking about. Oh, debating things, yeah. That's been one of my favorite parts, honestly, because most of the people that I try to debate with get very, very heated about things. I get heated about some things, but, like, usually I can keep my composure for most topics. Unless we're talking about, like, identity politics and human rights, that sort of thing. And I get very heated very quickly. So don't talk about those things to me. But it's been fun having level-headed debates about different things. It makes it a lot more fun when you can sort of argue about, like, what you actually want to do, as opposed to getting into massive fights over essentially nothing. So yeah, it certainly is something. I'm going to speak words for Arasu. It doesn't mean anything. I just smacked my hand on my keyboard. Oh, and my HUD is gone. There we go. Oh, I saved a screenshot. Wonderful. Yeah, so I can turn that off. My streaming software is not optimized for YouTube, so it just doesn't work at all. What the heck is going on? What are you doing? Stop. I lowered my shield at the worst time. There we go. How? Oh, because it's not leaves. That was confusing. Let's see. Something. I spelled projects wrong in the title, but it's gonna stay like that because I find it amusing. Let's see. What kind of problems have we run into already? One of the things that we've had trouble deciding on is like an art style for the game. Because we're both into very dark art styles, but at the same time, like, we're also into sort of cartoony art styles. He plays Binding of Isaac a lot, if that gives you any sort of inclination as to our preferred style. I don't play that, but I like sort of the bizarre upside down darkness to it. Yeah. So that's one of the things we've talked about. Sort of a horror cartoony style, kind of like Spooky's House of Horrors. I think that's the name of it. Am I thinking of the right game? We're about to find out. Spooky's House of Jump Scares. And then, is this the game that I'm thinking of? It is indeed. Spooky's House of Jump Scares is, oh! That's sort of the style that I would like to go in, but we decided that's kind of like not, doesn't really fit the style of the game very well. It's kind of, I'm sorry for all of my yawning. I don't know what's up with me today. It's kind of the style that we wanted for our first design, our first concept, game concept. But it's not going to work for this one just because it's a vastly different setting. And I just don't think it would look good with the types of things that we're doing. So, one thing that we are being very careful about is diversity in our, or the representation of diversity in our games. So a lot of different like ensithnicities and genders and like all of the identity politics are represented in some form, as well as a few abstract moral issues that most people haven't had to deal with yet, or just choose not to deal with. We've kind of we've started we've started trying to figure out how to incorporate those into the game as well. Well, all of our games, because that's something that's very important for both of us. Is everybody gets, not really forcing it in, but like if like you don't want to have a character that's it's like a lesbian just for the sake of diversity, but like there are certain characters that that like it would make sense. It makes more sense for them to be a lesbian as opposed to straight or whatever else they may be. Excuse me. Um, the race issue is something that we've touched upon, but we've never actually gone into depth about it because, unfortunately, for our desire to be diverse, we are both white, and so we don't have a lot of experience or knowledge about what it's actually like to be a minority or something like that. Something like that. Just a minority or an underrepresented race. Which I guess in some places being white is a minority, but where we are it is not. But I think we're probably going to have to consult friends and, you know, people that we're close to and comfortable talking about this kind of stuff with. Well, it's not. I want to be careful about how I say that. It's not being comfortable about talking about it, it's being comfortable sharing, like, difficult experiences. Like, make sure that the other party is comfortable sharing, like, unfortunate things that happen to them because of racist people and a racist culture. Because, like, it could be perceived as some sort of microaggression saying that you're not comfortable talking about race issues. It's like a lot of people don't have that choice. Like, they have to deal with microaggressions and racism all the time. So it's not fair to be like, oh, I don't feel comfortable talking about racism. It's like, shut up. You don't have to deal with it. Sorry, that was a mini rant for you. That's one of those things that, yeah, anyways. I have my own problems. Yeah, so that's something that we haven't actually discussed, and we're probably going to. No, we've already talked about it a little bit, but not overtly talk about real world racism. But we've made the decision that we want abstract races as opposed to more realistic races and ethnicities and that kind of thing, because it can get a little bit too real for some people when you're literally making a war game that involves different races, which I feel like I spoiled some of it a little bit. I can go into it because it's not a major part of the game. Well, it's something. It is a part of the game. We kind of decided that we want the player character's faction to be sort of one sort of race, kind of. We want them all to be very similar in appearance. And then we want the quote-unquote enemy to be a much more diverse, like, faction. with like a lot of different races and species and whatnot. And we're going with sort of a fantasy-esque system for races. So like elves and not a lot of human like equivalents. Just because again, it can get very real very quickly if you use real representations of racism, which I think we might imply, but we don't. It's going to be subtle political statements, is basically what I'm getting at. It's not. You don't want to shove it in your face like that it's the main focus of the game, because it's not. We have a different idea of what the main moral point will be. But that is definitely one of the things that we have decided to make intentional in our design is there is the battle between diversity and sameness. So that's something that we've tried to make a point about including, is just that sort of statement. It's not even like a statement, it's just the suggestion. It's like a question, You're not saying, this is what you should think, this is what I think. You're just saying, what do you think? Like, it's inviting you to take a moment and just really sort of think through what you actually believe and that kind of thing, which I think is the way that is most effective in terms of political discussions, because everybody's going to have different opinions about everything. It's just how we work, especially in America, where we take up, most of a continent. Well, half of a continent. Like, America is a massive place. People are going to have different opinions when they live 2,000 miles apart. That's just how humans are. So, I think leaving it just as a suggestion, just like, hey, think about this moral dilemma, is definitely the way that I think that you should approach the different issues, because otherwise it can get very heated. People arguing about, what they actually believe. So, and I'm fairly open about what I believe, but I try to keep like political discussions to a minimum in YouTube videos and in streams, just because it's supposed to be like an escape from that, and I don't want to like force people to like come to learn about game development and then all of a sudden it's a political discussion. Like, this poor one person just joined as I was talking about racial stuff and then just left again. Like, not even hearing about the game development side. So that's why I try to... that is how it works. That's why I try to keep not game development talk. That's the point. Political discussions to a minimum. Even though it needs to be talked about, there's a time and a place. And when people come to get an escape from that, it's unfair to force it on them anyways. kind of like video games. Like, there are certain games that are based in a way that allows for political discussions, um, which is great. But then there are some games that it just really doesn't belong there. Um, and it's important to make a distinction that, like, there is a time and a place for politics, and there's a time and a place to just be with people. You don't have to argue and, like, discuss difficult things all the time. Like, it's very important to just be together sometimes, which is a hard thing to do, admittedly. I have a lot of trouble with that, but it's a very important thing to do, to be intentional about. Because you can say it's an important thing to do, and then just, like, whenever you happen to be with other people, you're like, oh, this is good. But, like, to make the distinction of, like, going out of your way to just be with someone, it's very important. Anyways, game dev talk time. Enough about philosophy and all that kind of stuff. I think that yeah, I don't know. We started this whole discussion because we were talking about diversity in our character bases in our games. Yeah, I don't know. I think I kind of want to talk about the art style decision, because that's another big decision that you have to make whenever you're developing a game. You do have to decide on one art style, or depending on the level of abstractness in your game, maybe two, but, like, any more than that and it gets really messy and not good looking. Having multiple art styles is a very difficult thing to pull off, and oftentimes it just looks weird as opposed to adding something to the game. So deciding how to design and, like, sort of the tone is a really big step in the development process, and we kind of do it out of order, where we come up with sort of the tone of the game that we want, and then we decide, like, what kind of art style we want, and then we come up with a plot, and then we redesign the art style. It's a very ineffective way to do it, but that's just how we work. Our brains don't work linearly. It's a big ol' wibbly wobbly mess of information up there. And if it takes redesigning certain portions of the game, then so be it. A lot of game developers, I think, work like that, where they just kind of design everything out of order. Bigger companies can't really afford to do that. But indie developers, I think, are more scattered and sort of almost more human. because like game development companies, it's a company. Companies are not humans. They're not. They're very statistical and to the point. Um, yeah, it's not. They don't work the way that indie developers work, um, which is fine. You know, big game companies make good games, and indie developers make good games too sometimes. Although Bethesda, some companies don't make good games even if they are massive corporations. Um, don't take it personally if you like Bethesda games. I love Bethesda games, but they messed up, and they're gonna have to deal with the consequences. Although they continue to dig themselves deeper. That's a different discussion. We need to stop talking about Bethesda. um, yeah, but I think the way that normally you would want to sort of the order of things that you would want to do is come up with sort of the plot line that you want, as well as some world building, like choosing sort of like, do you want like a fantasy, or do you want sci-fi, or like a modern thing, or steampunk, or you know, the sort of style of world that you want. And if it changes over time, you know, that's fine. It's not a big deal. You know, games change through development. That's just how it has to work. But choosing a starting point with a style is generally the direction that I would go, and then you can move on from there. So you choose the style, then you make up the basic sort of plot and world building. The basic plot and world building, and then move on to the nitty gritty, like choosing an art style kind of thing. And the art style is. I'm sorry, I have like something in my throat. It's hard to talk. Hydrate. Don't overhydrate, but hydrate. The art style is something that personally I like messing around with a lot. And it's something. Yeah, it is something. It changes a lot, but I think between the two of us, we like having sort of an undefined style, because it gives us more freedom to sort of design the game the way that we want it to look, and then unify it later, which again, very inefficient way to do things, but it's just how we work. Redesigning old elements, like basic things, is like just how we operate. As stupid as that is, that's how it is. But I think choosing an art style is. I think you should look. I would recommend looking at different similar types of games. So, if you're looking at a psychological horror game,
that has to do with like paranormal stuff. Look at like paranormal movies and shows and games and books and all of that, and you'll start to develop like this idea of what sort of psychological horror art looks like. So for our original game, I guess I can give some of it away since it's years down the line, and I think only 3 out of 7 billion people on the planet will ever see this video. But we wanted to have sort of a creepy survival game, kind of like Don't Starve, but like not Don't Starve. It's very different from that. But like definitely like sort of a horror art style, very creepy, very dark. It wouldn't have like jump scares or anything. It would just be very. It would be a very uncomfortable experience, I guess, while also being fun. It's really hard to describe sort of what we were going for because it has so many layers, but we kind of settled on an art style sort of like Don't Starve, Binding of Isaac sort of thing for some parts of the world, but then it would sort of shift to a much happier, lighter, like sort of Breath of the Wild. I don't want to compare it to that because then I would have to live up to that expectation, which is absurd, but sort of that like bright, cartoony sort of look to it, which I definitely I enjoy both of them, and I think that they both have their uses and very specific applications, but they can both be very enjoyable to look at and play and create, which is another very important thing to think about when you are deciding on an art style for your game. Is you have to enjoy making it, and you have to be able to pull it off, and like that's something that a lot of artists have trouble like admitting, is like it's hard to appreciate what you create because it's not exactly like the thing that you saw in your head, or you can see where you had a shaky hand when you were drawing, or something like that. You see all the tiny imperfections that nobody else sees because you were there for the whole process. And that's a very difficult thing for artists to sort of overcome. But I feel like you can definitely. Most artists can tell. Most trained artists can tell. I guess not trained, experienced. That's the word. Experienced artists can sort of figure out whether or not they can pull off a style. Like if you told Van Gogh or someone like who the heck was the guy that did Cubism? But like those abstract styles, if you told them to do hyperrealism, they probably do okay, but like that's not something that they can perfectly achieve, which is, I know that's not a good example because I've seen some of their other stuff and I know that they can, but like sort of that sort of thing where like you don't have to be proud of what you created, and you don't have to like love it, but you can definitely tell when something just straight up looks not good.
but also you want to have a lot of you want to have fun when you're creating this stuff, because otherwise you're going to get frustrated and you're not going to want to keep going, and it's just not going to. It's a game that was made um, when the developers weren't appreciating the experience and the game itself is not usually a game that's fun to play. Like, a lot of the elements seem very forced, and it's just not. It's not something that I would recommend. So definitely make sure that you're having fun when you're choosing the art style. If you don't have fun creating a hyper realistic landscape, then that's probably not the way that you want to go. Another way that you could look at it is if you don't enjoy a certain art style or creating a certain art style, then it probably won't fit your game anyways, because elements that come from your own head already have a sort of subconscious level of like a hint of what you enjoy doing. So, like, we enjoy making stupid, subtle jokes that you have to, like, pay attention carefully to actually see and, like, understand. So our art style often has very subtle references, or it has very small portions that make it feel more alive, I guess. It adds new detail that, you know, if we didn't like those stupid subtle things, then having that stupid subtle art style wouldn't really fit, because that sort of subtlety doesn't exist within the game. So if you're making something that's very fantasy based, then you're gonna have sort of a fantasy art style in your head already. That's just sort of how the human brain works. It's always thinking about like a trillion things all at the same time, which can be extremely irritating. Just putting that out there. Human brain is really annoying sometimes. Anyways, yeah, so make sure that you are enjoying the art style. Make sure that it sort of fits the plot of the game. If you have a plot based around, like, machines and aliens, then it doesn't make sense to also have, like, I don't know. I guess it wouldn't make sense to have cowboys and ninjas. Like, that just... there are certainly certain, like, comedy tropes that do stuff like that. Like the Cowboys versus Aliens movie. Like, it's just stupid and fun and whatever. But, like, there are certain things that need to match in order to pull off, like, a semi-serious tone. And even if you're going for, like, a goofy, like a goofy comedy, like, just silly game, like, there still has to be a certain level of seriousness. Like, the player has to take certain parts of it seriously in order to fully enjoy it. Like, if you make a game where the threat is just silly and stupid, then the player's not gonna... It's not gonna... You're not gonna feel pressure to, like, actually win. You're just gonna be like, oh, he's just a moron. Like, I don't wanna... What's the point in defeating him? He's just stupid. Like, that sort of thing you have to be careful about, because there are certain parts that you do have to take seriously, and then there are certain parts that you can goof off at.
and deciding what like parts that is just up to experience and personal choice. Just kind of feeling it out, seeing if it flows the way that you want it to. But it's definitely one of the things to watch out for. Keep in mind, all of this advice is coming from like someone who has minor experience. So like a lot of it is just from kind of what I've encountered already. Like, I guess it's not minor experience, it's minor training, is what I meant. Like, I have a lot of sort of experience creating these sorts of things, but I've never been formally trained, not in depth, about creating games and that sort of thing. So a lot of it is just experience, which leads to explaining being hard sometimes. But I think I've explained pretty well what I'm talking about. Yeah, so art style is a very important thing. Even if it changes throughout the course of the game, that's something that happens. You know, it's okay. Art styles change over time. Your game will start to sort of develop as if it has a mind of its own sometimes. But yeah, it's something that you want to be constantly aware of, is different portions of your game that won't stay perfectly static. So your storyline, sort of your theme, your goal, it might change slightly over time, and as it changes, you'll have to adapt and apply certain modifications to different parts of your game, such as making the style darker, or making the style more goofy and cartoony, or colorful, or something like that. Just very things that you wouldn't normally think about. You have to be very aware of constantly to get like a very cohesive feeling in your game. Because if it feels like you took all of the classic movies from my childhood, so you took like Indiana Jones and Harry Potter and Star Wars, and you just smashed them all together into one thing, it's not gonna feel right, you know? It's gonna feel stupid and poorly thought out, and yeah, so things will change over time, but you know, it's fine. It's a natural part of the process. Anyways, I think I'm going to stop it here. We've been going for 93 minutes, and I've said pretty much everything that I had to say. I recommend trying game development if you haven't. It's fun, it's hard, but it's worth it. And yeah, keep on working hard at your dreams, because I never thought that I'd be able to make YouTube videos and do game development at the same time, or ever, and I'm still going for it. So yeah, hope that my webcam and mic have been recording audio at the same time, and I hope that it hasn't sounded like utter horribleness, although I get the feeling that it has. So
I apologize for that. I didn't even know that my webcam had audio. So that's fun. Yay. Alright. Keep on dreaming and work at it. And you'll do pretty good. So, I'll see you all later. Bye-bye.